y'all doing fine?
We doing fine. Now, understand, I'm going to record these in case you want to, well, one, if you miss one, and you really have a hankering to hear it, that's fine. Yes. Well, that's right, because I've done that before. And if you're doing a raffle, and this is something to file away, if you're doing a raffle, you can actually download these recordings and use them as a prize. You know. So if you, for instance, you're doing a raffle, you can have your first prize, the little talk I did yesterday on Aaron Burr that we had together on Aaron Burr. That could be your first prize. And second prize would be the talk on Aaron Burr and the one I'm doing today. And third prize could be a whole series of the talks. And that'll teach them for entering your raffle. Okay, we are looking. Oh, are we in?
Yeah, it was selected with the wrong input. It was on a digital input instead.
You know, I knew that. I knew that. And in fact, when I left home this morning, I told my wife, I bet you it's going to be the wrong digital input. You know, I bet you it's going to be the wrong digital input. Thank you. Give him a round of applause. Go, bow. Oh, there. We'll wave. Okay.
Give him a round.
Yeah.
Did you take
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not uploading. So you can get it on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just type in the Aaron Burr, and you should be able to get it. Okay, but seriously, I'm taping it, and give me a week or so. I'll upload it to YouTube, and so you just type the name of this session, and you'll get it. Okay, and it'll have access to the PowerPoint stuff and all that. Okay, we are looking at. Oh, got to give him. He found out it was a digital input. All right, we're looking at American foreign policy because the 20th century is often called the what? Thank you. It's on the screen. The American century, right? Why is it called the American century?
Because this is America.
Because this is America. By government, we can call it anything we want, right? You know. Exactly. American century because the United States exerts so much power in the 20th century. Now, you might call the 19th century the British century, right? You know.
Guys, you beat that to death last year, the 19th.
Oh yeah, and we're sick of that, right? Yeah, I'm tired of it too. All right, so we're looking at American, but we're going to focus on American foreign policy, and that's going to be kind of a theme on several things that I'm doing this semester because we're going to be talking about hot spots in the world today in one of those 2-hour sessions, and we're going to look at, the nature of our mixed economy. So it's going to be a lot of things related to little foreign policy this semester, at least for me. So we're looking at American policy from I'm saying about 1893 to the current. What will happen, and what we're going to see is a pendulum swinging, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Now, if we're talking about American foreign policy, there are some inherent problems or issues that governments face in formulating policy in the United States. Now, gave you 2 political cartoons, and this cartoon represents or shows what? Who is that guy? Teddy Roosevelt. How do you know it's Teddy Roosevelt? He's got a mustache and he's big and he's carrying a big stick, right? And Teddy Roosevelt is doing what? Yeah, he is leading his great white fleet around the Caribbean. Circling around the Caribbean. We'll talk about that in a little bit, historically what that was all about. Teddy Roosevelt, you could say, was an interventionist. He saw a foreign policy that was active and involved and intervened around the world, or at least as much as it could. So that's on one end of the spectrum. The other one is this one, and this was in 1938, and this says Abyssinian whirlpool, and Abyssinia is the modern country of Ethiopia. So wouldn't be 1938, be 1935. Italy is dealing with, or 37, is dealing with, has invaded Ethiopia, and that becomes a major international issue. And that's Britain there trying to get the United States to become involved in addressing the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, and the United States is doing what? No. Is saying no, is just going to stay there, and he's in splendid isolation and letting the world go by. And that's really what we've got as polar opposites in terms of American foreign policy. And we see that pendulum go back and forth. Now, why those who are favoring an active intervening, and we're going to call it imperialism in a little bit, but that has such a negative connotation. How would an American administration justify a foreign policy that involves intervening in world affairs, actively exerting American foreign policy? Now, I didn't think you were starting a fire. You're talking about the universal symbol of money, of course. Okay, so an administration may say that's a way to get money. You exert your power. You do it for the sake of money. Okay, what else might be used by a political? Because there have been a lot of administrations that have favored intervening. In fact, if you look at the 20th century, probably more time we followed an active foreign policy, international policy, than more passive. So money is certainly involved. What else?
Democracy.
Okay, security. In how so?
Defending ourselves against possible enemies.
Okay. If sort of the Bush doctrine, if we see a problem somewhere else, even if it is an active, a potential problem, better to deal with it now than before it becomes an active power. So you can intervene in other countries even if you think they might be a problem in the future, like we did in Iraq. We weren't sure, but we thought they could be, so we intervene immediately. Okay? So security, what else?
Democracy.
Okay, democracy. We are out and we're going to promote democracy around the world. We got democratic principles, right? And we look at the world, and there are a lot of countries that don't. And wouldn't it be nice if
Everybody be nice.
everybody were nice to one another? That would be good, right? We could put like a Dairy Queen in every capital, and people would be nice. But when you think about it, that also involves security, because one of the amazing things that we've seen historically is democracies generally don't.
They don't last long.
Yeah, and they don't go to war with one another. So democracies don't tend to fight one another. So maybe for security issues, better to live in a democratic world than to live in one where you have totalitarians trying to exert power over one another using the military. So you promoting democracy, principles.
Well, in most cases, for democracy, the country has to have a certain wealth and prosperity to go along with it.
Oh, what the heck. Just make them democracy. Yeah. Just have them elect somebody.
Right.
Right. You got to be at a certain economic level and have a history of it. Even a lot of people have suggested you have to have certain, cultural, even religious backgrounds for democracy to really take, Western-style democracy take root. In certain places, if you don't have that cultural background, you just can't create it. You just can't create it from thin air. Okay, anything else that kind of pushes us towards intervention? an active foreign policy.
In morality.
Okay, a morality. You see immorality someplace in the world, like, for instance, what?
Western morality.
Well, okay, Hitler is running death
A
camps.
crazy thug stepping on Ethiopian Haile Selassie for no reason except he's been fascist for so long and hasn't done anything.
Well, sure, and well, right, and Hitler has death camps.
But he was elected.
Yeah, he was elected. Hitler was elected. Daggone those Germans. But you know, do you intervene, or do you say, oh, internal issue? Internal issue. You know, is there global morality? So all of these kind of speak to, you know, an interventionist policy. So we need to be active, right? On the other hand, you know, this isolationist strain has been present for our entire history, you know, and may be re-exerting itself now. You know, it's not a surprise because, geez Louise, the pendulum has been in one direction a long time. You know, historically, it makes sense for it to swing back. You know, what would those who would say in an American democracy would say, man, we need to be isolated. Isolationism is a good thing for us as a democratic republic.
Maybe at that time, but not today.
Well, even today you could say it.
You could
I
say
think you could say it. Make a case for it. What case could be made for it?
We can't solve all of those problems, and people now think doesn't matter what little revolution we have, because the Americans aren't doing anything about it.
Okay, we don't have the means to solve problems all over the world. My gosh, do you know what we spent in Iraq and are spending in Afghanistan? Afghanistan, for crying out loud. You know, the rest of the world, you know, is bigger than Afghanistan. We just can't do it, you know. And if we're tied down somewhere, it's going to only embolden other people, you know, to be more aggressive, you know. So maybe that's not a good idea. What else might be the case made for isolation?
Geography.
Okay, geography. My gosh. Have you looked at the United States lately? You know? Why can't you drive to Europe?
Pontoons and cars.
Yeah, they don't have pontoons and cars. You know? You know? You got to fly to Hawaii or take a boat, you know? Because we're surrounded by oceans, right? So we have this isolationist path because we have been physically isolated for so long. Okay? What else?
Bargaining?
What's that?
Bargaining?
Okay, bargaining. Like if
Trade.
yeah, okay, trade. You know, if we're here, we could deal with other people as legitimate trading partners rather than trying to manipulate them. And we might actually make more money if we're dealing with people that are equals rather than dealing with inferiors. You know, through trade. And remember, we talked about the problem with colonization. We've talked about that before. What's the big problem with colonization? It costs money. The more power you want to assert over another country, what? The more expensive it gets. You know, even if they're not a colony. You know, how much did we spend propping the government up in South Vietnam? Now, whether they could have done it on their own or not, don't know. But we spent a boatload of money keeping that system going, you know, economically, militarily, you know. That's a lot of money that could be used in other ways, right? So maybe we shouldn't, it wasn't a good stewardship of money. And on a philosophical level, what makes, you know, sort of philosophically inherent, a philosophically inherent problem with being having an interventionist foreign policy?
You're trying to put your ideas on the people that may not want to do that.
Okay, good. John, yesterday when we were talking a little bit about the revolution and the beginning of the nation, you said something that was really important. What were some of the principles that we were fighting for as we were struggling against the British? What's some of the fundamental principles? Okay, representation, right? And representation, no taxation without representation, right? And if we are fighting for representation, that's one of the essential things that went into the American Revolution. What does that mean? What does it mean to say no taxation without representation?
You're not given a chance to voice your views. Where you're concerned.
Okay, good. We should have the right. We, the tax, should have the right to express our views, right?
Right.
That should apply to
Foreign policies too?
Only,
to what?
To foreign policies?
Okay, to foreign policies too. Yeah, how would it?
in our case, it was only the people that had wealth.
Okay, well, in the United States, but if philosophically I'm saying part of our fundamental ethos as a country is that we believe the people of the country have the right to determine their future. They should not be taxed by a foreign power. We should determine it ourselves. And we may make a mistake, or we may get it right, but who's making the decision? We are. We're going to go to Panama and do what? Make a decision for them. You know, we're going to the Philippines and do what? Make the decision for them. And, you know, fundamentally, philosophically, you know, you've got people that say, that's wrong. You know, we can't be Americans and believe in individual rights and responsibilities, that's right, and then go over there and say, we don't believe it here. Right. You know, we believe it at home, but we don't believe it there. You talked about spreading American, you know, values and ideals. You know, my gosh, if we become imperialists, if we have colonies, we were a colony. If we have a colony, what then are we?
Yeah, but we've done this so long, you know, all this we're talking about, go to different countries, Vietnam and all these places, that it's expected of us to do this, I guess.
Well,
You know?
because you build that pattern.
That pattern.
Well, but that becomes a problem, right? A philosophical problem within America. You know, do we want, and that's, of course, and we still deal with it. I mean, when you start talking about changing fundamental ideas of liberty and freedom in the United States for things like security, are we gaining to protect the homeland? Which, frankly, I find uncomfortable even using the term homeland. That sounds like fatherland or motherland, you know, the homeland. You know, what are we protecting if we have sacrificed freedoms and liberties to do it? We're protecting
Our style of life.
Well, are we? Because we're changing our style of living. What we're protecting is what? Dirt. Dirt.
Our road.
Yeah, we're protecting dirt. You know, that's what we're protecting. But we're not protecting the values that have been inherent here. And that's philosophically where some are saying are going to be on the other side. And they were at the turn of the 20th century, and they're here present now. They're saying the exact same things, questioning United States foreign policy in terms of intervention. Yeah, John.
The problem with another country and being intervened, whatever the word is.
Intervention, yes.
If you're trying to influence your values on
course.
another culture that may not have your values or even have ever considered your values, and they don't, no, it doesn't.
What was in that water? Oh, it's lemonade. Is it spiked? Is it spiked?
No, it's vitamin water.
Oh, vitamin. Oh, vitamin.
That's better.
Kickapoo juice.
No, I'll tell you something. One time, when I preach, they leave me a cup of water, you know, because my throat gets dry, my mouth gets dry. And so one time somebody put a Sprite.
Okay.
In it, and I'll tell you, when those bubbles hit me, yeah, man alive, I didn't expect those bubbles. They were kind of a surprise, but now I'm very much alert, and I feel like a man. Well, in fact, I even felt my beard grow. All right, you're right. You're opposing values, and that's what these guys are saying. You know. If they make mistakes, we made mistakes. You know, they have a right to make their mistakes. You know, it's not our business. Part of what we believe is that people have a right to chart their own destiny. And that's what isolationists are saying. And the interventionists are saying, are you nuts? Are you crazy? You're going to let a crazy person kill, slaughter tens of thousands of people and say it's okay because the people are making the decision. The heck, the people are making the decision. He's making the decision. So we get this struggle, even philosophical struggle outside of security and such, or financial. You get this real philosophical struggle. What does America mean? What does it mean to be in a representative democracy? Okay, so we've got this, and we're going to see. What we're going to see is we're going to see the pendulum. And it's going to swing this way, and it's going to swing this way, and it's going to swing this way. It's going to go back and forth, often based on the what's happening around the United States. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to kind of dispute that statement you made, because you look at...
I was hoping you would.
Well, you look at Germany, and what Hitler did, you look at what Stalin did. You got two different societies here. So Germany was our heritage. Russia wasn't. So we didn't care what Stalin did in Russia.
Maybe.
Oh, yes, they did.
Yeah, that's shing, shing. That's going way in left field. Woo! I don't want to go there. But you may be right. Before we look at America, as we move in to around the turn of the century, the American century, tell me what was it? How would you describe American foreign policy before, let's say 1900?
Isolation.
Okay, it tended to be more isolated, inwardly focused. Let's say focused inwardly. Why would the United States be focused? Why would their focus be internal before the 1900s?
Building up the country.
Oh man, that's good. Everybody. I had a half a dozen people say at the same time. It was wonderful. What are we doing?
You're building a country.
No, it's good. You're building up, because all of you are saying about the same thing. We're building up the country, right? We're getting ourselves straight as a nation, right?
We were really becoming the first modern country as far as technology.
Okay.
It's application in most cases.
We are emerging, right? As a nation that's a fairly unique nation, right? I mean, if you look at this map, my gosh, we're starting as green, and most people don't realize it. People around the year 1790, most of them were green. Yeah, they really were. You can see it on the map. They tended to be green, It was not emerald green, but kind of a muted green. So, kind of an exorcist green, kind of green. We were focused on establishing ourselves as a country first, right? Because this wasn't a natural process. This is a pretty unusual process.
You had to get rid of the English and stuff.
You had to get rid of the English because you know about the English. Yeah. We had to establish ourselves. We had to establish.
We had to take the parts of Mexico we wanted.
We had to take parts of Mexico, and that didn't come easy.
We had to buy,
What's that?
We had to buy Louisiana.
We had to buy Louisiana.
Slaves.
What's that?
Deal with slaves.
We had to deal with slaves. We had to deal with Native Americans. We had to. So when you're talking about Louisiana and when you're talking about Mexico, taking stuff from Mexico, settling the Oregon territory with Britain, we're looking at expansion. So the focus is on growing as a nation, sort of manifest destiny. So establishing our system here on the East Coast. We're talking about expanding to the Pacific, right? We're talking about internal issues that seem to occupy it a good night, at least, dominated the agenda for 40 years in the 1800s was the issue of slavery. and that was the issue, slavery. Are we going to be, partially slave, partially free? Are we going to be all slave, all free? What are we going to be? So that occupies it. That had only, vague connections in terms of foreign policy. So we're focused on these internal issues. Native Americans, we Americans are expanding west. There's only one little problem. Yeah, there are people who are living there.
They need a lot of land.
That's right, by the culture. By their culture, they need an enormous amount of land. And understand a lot of those tribes have pushed out other tribes. So, it's not a clean story. It's not neat and clean. You're talking about like every human story where different groups of people have to live with one another. It's a complex story of conquest and, surrender. So we're one of them that's now the player, and we're focused on moving west, expanding. What else are we kind of dealing with? You said economic expansion?
Correct.
Yes.
Becoming modern, telephone. We were the biggest country to have all these things working first than anywhere else. As far as how to make modern steel, how to build railways quickly, electric power.
And why here? Why would it be so essential, particularly when you're talking about, transportation? Why is it so important here? The size of the country. We
into our own business.
What's that? We
Didn't have time to attend to anybody.
Yeah, we got plenty of business to attend to. And until we get to the near the end of the 19th century, we have something that is kind of remarkable and unique among, Western powers that a man named Turner said made all the difference. Because, we have something that's really unique. Do you happen to know what it is that's really unique about America? When you look at Germany and you look at Britain and you look at France, they don't have this, but we do. And this kind of shapes us.
You have no limits.
Okay, you're right. What?
We have two oceans.
Okay, true. Turner talks about we have a frontier, which is that unlimited. We have a frontier, which means a guy living here has some place to go
And build on all that.
and build and have unlimited possibilities. Now, we could say, oh, no, he didn't. But the perception was there was a frontier you could go to.
We didn't need to go somewhere else.
We didn't have to go somewhere. We didn't have to go to Africa.
We didn't have to colonize places.
Yeah, we didn't have to go to Asia. There was a frontier here. And if you're a small farmer in Virginia and you don't have enough land, there was a place to go. And it was a frontier, and you could almost recreate yourself. And that's what people did. Or that's what people wanted to do. Even if they didn't do it, they believed it was there. They knew they could, or they believed they could.
Go
What's
west,
that?
young man.
Go west, young man. The Horace Greeley. Yeah. There was always a place to go. What happens as we get to the end of the 19th century? What happens to the Turner writes about this? What happens to the frontier? It disappears. There is no more frontier. Because we did the transportation so well, because we ran the electrical wires and telegraph wires so well, the idea of frontier is gone. You don't. What's that? Yeah. And understand, going to Alaska was a heck of a lot different than going to Nebraska. All of a sudden you lose this frontier, and so America has to change. Because it's no longer the land of limitless opportunity, unlimited opportunity. Because now we're like Britain and France. There's a limit to where we can go.
But we still have lots of immigrants coming in there.
Oh, absolutely. Settling all this land.
That's about the time we started to change pretty rapidly from an agrarian society to a more industrial society, and our frontiers were more ethereal, you know.
Exactly.
They weren't places. They were ideas.
They become, and mythic.
Yeah.
You know, the myth of the frontier. You know, the myth of the and I'm looking for Joni, the cowboy. You know, that just shows up. You know, and goes because he's not part of society. He is the example of the frontier. You know, in fact, he doesn't fit in anywhere other than this frontier.
Except on MeTV.
Except MeTV. That's exactly right. You know, MeTV, it still exists. So I guess that's the last frontier. MeTV. Yeah, John.
One thing this country had that we had almost all the natural
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And that's going to affect the industrialization because we don't need to go elsewhere. You know, but it's going to be interesting as we get this industrial boom after the American Civil War.
Right,
You know,
revolution they call it.
yes, that industrial revolution where things really change and you have the robber barons and the huge, enormous wealth in the United States. What are some of those industrialists in the United States drawing resources from America? They're producing a lot of product now, right? More than they have ever produced in the history of this country.
And they need somewhere to sell it.
Now, all of a sudden, you get a point where it used to be enough to sell here. Now, you need to sell every place.
Everywhere else.
You need to sell elsewhere. Now, that sounds great. That's sell outside the United States. Well, that only works if one, they need it, and two, what's that?
Things are prosperous.
Yeah, you got to make sure it's going to somebody who can pay for it, you know. And you got to
get it there.
You got to get it there, right? If I can't get it there, then it's worthless, right? So I've got to be able to ship it there. And so at the same time, we've got this, remember I talk about perfect storms, because that's what happens historically. You have these perfect storms where a whole bunch of things come together. All of a sudden, along with that industrial revolution that's occurring, and changes in manufacturing and production, you also have changes in things like shipbuilding. And we move from wooden vessels driven by wind and horses to first to iron. And the problem with building an iron boat is yeah, you got some problems when you build an iron boat. You know, it kind of
The Navy took
it's kind of
kept you having eight.
yeah, and bailing it out, right? So but then we move from iron to, of course, steel changes everything. You know, you build bigger machines with steel. You know, you can produce more. You slap steel on a ship, and you've got something that is far more durable than wood, right? And this is really exciting. It is lighter. My gosh, you've got something lighter, bigger, more durable, driven by power.
You don't have to depend upon the wind.
You don't have to depend upon the wind. You could cram that thing full of
People and material.
yes, well, I'm thinking of Hello Kitty dolls. You can fill that thing full of Hello Kitty dolls so you can meet the Hello Kitty needs in other countries, right? Right?
China.
What's that?
Those are all made in China.
Oh, well, don't crush me. Yeah. Okay, so we are hitting, by the time we get to the end, by the time we get to 1900, we're seeing changes in the United States that's encouraging people to look outside. But remember, you still have that philosophical thing going on that, you know, the United States needs to be really, really careful as it starts exerting influence. Okay, so we're entering this time when America it has the opportunity to look beyond itself. And we talking about joining the club. Now, what's happening, and this is an amazing thing happening in the world. What's going on in the world at this time? What are other countries doing? Because the Industrial Revolution isn't just in America. In fact, what other countries are producing as much and as fast? England is. Well, China isn't yet, but England is.
England, France, Germany.
France is. Germany is. Man, they are producing stuff as well. And part of the reason, as they start producing stuff really fast, they start thinking about
Selling it.
selling it. They got to sell it to somebody. Now, you can't, the Germans aren't going to sell to the English, right? Because
They got their own.
they got their own. You know, so they're going to have to find markets. And
Was it the British had an empire?
right.
Germany didn't. Germany wanted an empire to do that.
And the assumption is that if you're still working with this sort of a quasi-mercantile, you know, some of those ideas are still hanging on. You know, you got to have a positive trade balance. That's how you determine wealth. More money needs to be coming in to your country than going out. You know, that's kind of an old-time economic philosophy. You know, that shows national wealth. And you're kind of still working with that a little bit. Although we're moving away from
We're
it.
doing that today.
Well, that's right. We follow a sort of a neo-mercantilist international concept. Yeah. So it's a little different. Okay. So we've got a global, international, domestic peace and security. Now you talked about in America. You know, I think you mentioned slavery. You know, as a big issue in America, and slavery ends up causing Civil War. You know, slavery becomes the cause of a civil war. And so we're having all this internal conflict, right? You still have bands of Native Americans doing something that is pretty darn inconsiderate when you think about it. And what are those Native Americans doing? Trying to hold on to that land. And how dare they do that? Because we give them land that's every bit as good, right?
For them, anyway.
Yeah, well, they don't. They wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. And they need. The problem is they're not flexible enough, because we'll give them land, and then we'll find something good on the land, and then we'll take it and give them other land. Yeah, and we'll find something good there, and we'll move them someplace else. So but they need to be, as my daughter, chill. If they would just chill, instead of just chill, and be willing to move around, that's okay. But that issue is pretty much settled by by 1900. We don't have Native Americans. The West is becoming an idea, a concept. It doesn't become a reality anymore. So we've got production, economic security. We've got political security. Who's north of us? Canada. Oh, gee. Throw snowballs at us. Boy, oh boy. Although, you may not know, there was a plan presented in the 1930s, a Canadian invasion of the United States.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes, Canadian, and I can't think of the guy's name. He developed a plan, and it was a general. It wasn't like a guy in a shack somewhere, or a kid in his basement, doing it. It was a Canadian general develops this plan on how Canada could invade the United States. And this 1930s. We we could be saying, a boot. Yeah, we could be saying a boot.
In the 30s, Canada was
Thinking
still
because
British.
economically we were in pretty bad shape.
Well, it was
easier to do.
Well, the idea was if you didn't plan it, the United States was eventually going to absorb Canada, and this was a way to resist it. And it was fascinating, that it would be an invasion into Minnesota. But it would be like a raid, and it would be a raid into Minnesota and then an immediate retreat because the United States would respond in force. And understand, the United States, and we'll talk about that in a second, would respond in force and then push into Canada, and then Canada could appeal to the empire. for help in resisting the United States.
Because it was still part of the empire.
That's right. And so Britain would appeal to Britain to help them resist the United States.
And we don't want Britain involved in this.
No, heck no. Maybe the French,
Yeah,
but not Britain. Okay. So anyway, we've got all this security. So right now is the opportunity. We have the opportunity. We've solved our problems here. We have the chance to look externally, and we've got Canada on the north. Canada's not going to be a threat, right? I mean, geez Louise. Yeah, too much like Americans, right? I mean, the big football field, 12 people, it ain't gonna work. Geez Louise, they couldn't even support the Grizzlies. I don't think that's going to be a problem. And what's on the south? Down south? Mexico. Oh, gee. Mexico is stability, right? As we hit the beginning of the 20th century. Right? Stability? No. They got all kinds of people running around. Pancho Villa and, it's a mess down there. So we've got a lot of security, right? Okay. And the European powers and Japan are scrambling for empire. And that's fascinating. Now, why are they all scrambling? Because they all are. If you look at a map of the world in 1850, you're going to have a lot of it be the color of, un-Western land. Maybe on a map it'd be gray. And the British are red and the French are blue and, the Spanish are yellow or something like that. But most of it's gray, right? When you look at a map of the world in 1910,
See a lot of color.
you see a lot of color on that map, right? Because Africa is now all with colors. And Asia, all with colors. And, so what is pushing and Japan is part of it, because Japan wants to seize itself as, although Eastern Asian, sees itself really as a Western style power. Why are they scrambling? Why are these countries scrambling for empire?
Their natural resources.
They're looking to exploit natural resources.
We have a lot of.
Yeah, you go to colonies and you get natural resources. Yeah, we don't need those.
Not yet.
Not yet. But so they're looking for natural resources. What else are they looking for? Places to export their goods. Markets. Influence.
They want, to be a national world power. You gotta have.
You want to be
some
bigger.
kind of empire.
You want to be bigger. You want to be bigger. And that's why Germany will colonize Southwest Africa. And Southwest Africa is what?
Diamonds.
Well, diamonds, but mainly Southwest Africa is a desert. It is the Namib Desert. And yet, Germany colonized a desert. Why did they colonize a desert?
They could.
Because they could, and they felt had to. Because they are competing.
But the English.
That's right, because if they don't get that desert, the English will. And we won't want the English taking that sand, right? One of the least hospitable places in the world is the Namib Desert. And yet the Germans are administering it from Berlin. Why? I don't know. I don't know. But yes, but you gotta have a colony. You gotta have a colony in Africa. My gosh. So you end up dividing everything. Everything up.
You can send your people there, your young men.
Yeah, you could send. That's right. That becomes sort of their frontier.
Right.
Yeah, and you could sell them bottled water because it's a desert. Bavarian water. That's that's kind of nice.
A lot of these really small countries got the idea looking at Britain. Hey, Britain was a small country and they got this influence all over the world. We can do that too.
Absolutely.
And Germany, you know,
Absolutely.
places, hey, we're gonna
Absolutely.
blow out here.
You know, and they're going to find out in about 50 years that it is a huge economic disaster.
Oh, yeah.
It is an
Because of what
absolute
you say,
economic
costs too-
disaster.
costs too much.
You know, because it costs too much money. And you're constantly having to put down little rebellions. You know, but they do it. Man, they do it. They're getting resources. Man, they're shipping. You know, those little hourglasses take a lot of sand. And, you know, so you gotta have sand from somewhere, right? You know? And wouldn't you buy Namby sand over? Oh, of course. You know. What's that?
It's more accurate.
Oh, it's way more accurate. Finer sand. Okay, so, but there's a scramble all over, and they're dividing the world up. Okay, and you know the United States. We want to be part of them too. You know, they all have it. Why can't we? Yeah, it's so unfair. You know, so
Why would we even want to do that? I mean, if you're already
Wait,
saying, look,
wait,
we got
let me-
Canada to the north and Mexico to the south, we can't even take them, so why would we take anybody else?
let me think about that. That's an excellent question. But we do. By gum, we do. Now, understand, you still have that philosophical issue. So it's not everybody that's doing it, but this is what's occurring in the world. And now we are not. Now, there's another little issue before we talk about Hawaii. Is there's another strain of philosophy within the United States that you can't negate. And it's something that is so different for us who lived after World War II. Part of almost the American ethos, part of who we are as Americans, really emphasized a small military, particularly a small army. You know, a really small army. Because there were certain assumptions that go back to our founding fathers that kind of pushed us to having an intentionally, not an accidental, but an intentionally small army. And it wasn't all about money. What would be some things in a representative democracy that would cause people to say, we need a small military?
You don't want the military coming in and controlling the individual.
You know,
We don't want to interfere in any other countries.
well, we're not going to interfere in other countries. You know,
We don't want the military to take care of the...
you've got a big military. What do big militaries want to do? What do militaries want to do? They want to fight. Militaries want to fight. I mean, why do you have a military if you're not fighting somebody? There's only so many cigarette butts you can pick up. You know, they really are. And so if you got this big military, you're going to want to use it. You're going to want to use it. And our founders, to a man, with the exception of Alexander Hamilton, bless his heart, believed that a small military, keeping the military small, was something to protect democracy. The military wasn't going to defend democracy. The military was a threat to democracy, and it's cheaper. Yeah, and so you keep a small army. And if you need your army, and this is also part of what it means to be an American, if you need the army, what do? You call the people. You call volunteers. And volunteers come and do the job. And they did it during the American Revolution. You know, they did it during the Mexican War. Well, 1812, they didn't do that great. But they did it during the
Civil War.
During the Civil War. They were state militias. Yeah.
Drafting during the Civil War.
Well, they were drafted. That's right. They drafted during the Civil War. But if you had $300,
That's true.
yeah. If you had $300, you could hire, the guy drinking from the bottle on the corner, and he could serve in your place. Fortunately, now no one can pay for a spot anywhere.
Just like they can't pay for a spot in one of our American colleges.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That would deny the democratic process, and we don't want to do that. All right. So you've got this idea of a small military. Well, one of the things, if you're going to start occupying places, you can't have a small military anymore. You're going to have a standing army, because unless the people you occupy are just really happy to have you occupying them, you're going to have to convince them that it's a good thing to be American. Okay, so. And that's pretty much. Okay, now the first opportunity to join the club is going to be in Hawaii. In 1893, we have a revolution in Hawaii. Now, does anybody know anything about Hawaii's background?
Independent country. It was a kingdom.
It is an independent kingdom.
They had kings and queens.
They had kings and queens. And Lilulani. Yeah, something Lilulani.
Beautiful women.
And beautiful women, because wearing grass skirts. They are. It was a law, in fact. And that's what caused the first problem with the British, why the British didn't have more influence, because the British brought lawnmowers. And that caused a cultural problem in Hawaii. But we have a revolution in Hawaii. So we've got a queen who decides that she wants to assert her authority. Hawaii for Hawaiians. And understand, one of the things she does is she takes the vote, because they had an interesting it was a kingdom, but they could elect, the people could elect people to sort of a House of Lords. It was in there. They had a Congress, and it was supposed to be the Lords, but people could vote for those. And one of the things she did was, and understand, Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, we're having more trade. Why does Hawaii become kind of a valuable place?
Because it protects the door in.
What's it?
Protects the door.
Okay, it protects the door in. That's good.
Well, we were talking sugar cane.
We talking
and
sugar cane and pineapple, and resources that we wanted.
All right. The big, yes.
You could stop there and get refueled.
There you
It
go.
was
Sandy,
right in between.
thank you for bringing sanity to this proceeding. I appreciate that. Hawaii becomes really good because you can refuel. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. If you're going to China, it's nice to be able to refuel, and get resupply and the whole schmear. So Hawaii becomes kind of this important thing. So there's a lot of trading going on in Hawaii. And we got a lot of Western business people, American, but you also have Germans, and you have French, and you have British, the ones that didn't have the lawnmowers, and they're there, and a lot of Asians, because it's midway between a lot of Asians there. Lilulani, when she's queen, she decides that Hawaii should be for Hawaiians, and she takes the right to vote away from naturalized foreigners. So even if you had been in Hawaii generations, if you were Asian and had been in Hawaii generations, and you could vote before, you can't vote now. And if you were Western, had been in Hawaii for generations, and you could vote before, you can't vote now. You're not going to be happy. And business people not only are unhappy, but they start getting really nervous. Because if Hawaii is moving in this direction, what would be the next step? You could kick them out. Or at the very least, take their land and businesses. And so business people start getting really, really nervous about the direction Hawaii is going. The kingdom of Hawaii is going. And so under the leadership, there's a little cabal that's made not just of Americans, although there's a lot of Americans. There's a German in there, and a guy who's French. he brought the croissants to the revolution meetings. So it was, they kind of got together and met. And the leader of this group was a guy named Samuel Dole. Samuel Dole. Now, Dole, as soon as I say Dole, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Dole, he has nothing to do with pineapples. No, he has nothing to do with pineapples. Instead, he comes from a missionary background. But he's one of these Westerners that's been there for generations. But he's an American, who has been there a long time. And he sort of leads this revolution in Hawaii and overthrows the government. And actually, it's not much to overthrow it. It's not like he's got thousands of people, so it's a really kind of a peaceful coup. And he takes over. And not unlike a lot of people who were in Texas, not everybody by any means, but a lot of people when Texas broke away from Mexico, Dole wants to do what? He wants to join the United States. He wants the United States to annex Hawaii. And so in 1893, he leads this revolution, sets up a provisional government, locks Leilani in her palace, and petitions the United States for annexation. Now, President of the United States is a one that you all know very well because he's relatively famous. Benjamin Harrison. Yeah, one of the highlights. One of the Harrison boys. Benjamin Harrison is president of the United States. He's a Republican. And they petition, he's an interventionist, because that's what the Republicans tended to be, wanting to be involved. They represented the manufacturers primarily, and this provides markets, and they could fit into the international community and exert power. And so he says to Dole, consider it done. Consider it done. Unfortunately, though, he's not. This is right at the end of his administration. And the president that follows, because we had an election in 1892, and Benjamin Harrison lost. So this is sort of like the last hurrah. John Tyler tried to do the same thing with Texas, kind of slip it in before he leaves office. Petition of annexation. We have a new president named Grover Cleveland. Now, when Grover Cleveland entered the White House in 1893, the people at the White House said, "Oh, do you want your old room back?" Because Grover Cleveland was the only president that served 2 non-consecutive terms. So he was president, lost to Harrison, became president again. Had a big scandal. Grover Cleveland had a big scandal. Outside of being named Grover. Which is a scandal enough. And having Cleveland named after him. No, Cleveland wasn't named after him. But
They spelled Cleveland wrong. How his original spelling would have A in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Cleveland.
Oh man, didn't know that. Well, they found that he had, and this seems kind of, it was pretty spicy then. Up until recently, it would have still been spicy. He wasn't married. And he had which I told my daughter, and I didn't want her to study Grover Cleveland because I told her that this wasn't biologically possible. He had a child out of wedlock with a young girl, So I told my daughter for years that wasn't biologically possible, or God would punish her severely. Anyway, Grover Cleveland's president of the United States. He kind of endures it. He gets married in the White House, marries a young gal. He's a player. Has a big mustache. That's probably what did it. Anyway, Grover Cleveland is elected president, and what's amazing about Grover Cleveland and his Southern Democratic buddies is he is a part of a group called the American Anti-Imperialist League, which means Grover Cleveland does not want the United States to acquire
More.
an empire. They are not looking to acquire an empire, you know. And this is a horrible. I like political cartoons. That's Grover Cleveland. Yeah. Well, this is not a pro Grover Cleveland, cartoon. Yeah, because Cleveland is kind of slumped down. He was one of the first pre-jazzicized presidents. So he was there, and the United States wants to take the Hawaiian queen, and that's a horribly racist queen. But anyway, this is not a pro-Cleveland, because he was against, when they submitted the petition, Grover Cleveland as president, before the Senate could act on it, pulls the petition. Because not only does he believe that the United States shouldn't annex Hawaii, but the whole Hawaiian Revolution was wrong. Okay? And he's getting support from Southern Democrats, including a guy named Blunt, who is a senator from Georgia. And he is strongly anti-imperialist. Now, why believes the United States shouldn't acquire foreign territory? Why would a Southern, and this guy he's from Georgia, and he is, I don't want to describe him.
Now George Peach.
Well, depends on how you define it. As long as the peach is white.
Oh.
He is sort of a hyper racist. White supremacist. You know. And yet he's supporting Grover Cleveland in opposing the annexation of Hawaii. Now, why would a Georgia racist oppose the annexation of Hawaii?
Brown
Hawaii
people.
is a different race too.
Yeah,
Brown people.
they're brown people. The last thing America needs is more brown people. You know, in fact, it's fascinating. He said if they somehow push it through, because we don't need more brown people in America, we're going to build a wall around Hawaii. Right? We'll keep them out, you know. So, but actually he said a moat, which seems kind of stupid to build a moat around Hawaii. But, you know.
Was it going to be fresh water?
You want to be sympathetic because he is from Georgia. But I'm sorry. I apologize. That's horrible. Georgia, there's a lot of, I've known a couple of really good Georgians. Well, at least one. So they very racist. He wants to keep America as white as we can. So he is against imperialism because it means American policy is going to be expanded into areas it shouldn't. And so even though we've got a revolution, they set up a republic in Hawaii in 1894, and it remains an independent country until later. And because in fact Hawaii is still an independent country. Did you realize that? It is not the 50th state. It is the 50th state. I'm just messing with you. All right, and then we'll take a break.
I read, I can't remember what I was reading particularly about the acquisition of Hawaii. When we got it, actually the largest population in Hawaii was Japanese. They came there as workers, sort of like on work visas, and Japan had a really strong interest in Hawaii at that time. It would have been certainly interesting if that had swung another way.
Yeah, and that's when Hawaii is going to be annexed in 1898. And that's going to be behind an important factor behind the United States annexing Hawaii, is that if the United States doesn't do it, Japan will. And if Japan, think of how the history would have changed had Japan annexed Hawaii. You know, well, and that's going to be a key in World War II. The amazing thing when you look at the Pacific Ocean You got Hawaii close to the middle, really close to the middle. But if you look east of Hawaii to the coast, if you go east of Hawaii, there is nothing. I mean, nothing until you get to San Francisco. Nothing. You look west of Hawaii, you've got the Marianas, you've got other island chains, but east of Hawaii, you got nothing. And that's in World War II. The Japanese strategy was if you could knock out Hawaii, then the United States Navy is anchored in San Francisco, which means they got a long way to go to get to Japan. That's a long route. So, I mean, that's why it was a calculated risk. But yeah, if they had occupied Hawaii earlier and incorporated it into their empire, of course, they would have had to go a long way to defend it. So anyway, take a break. Go, do what you need to do. I don't want to know, but enjoy yourself.
Don't leave yet.
Don't leave. Before you take your break, Sandy Day has something she'd like to talk to you about. Our tour of the Methodist Church on Monday.
Yeah, Monday, April 15th is when the West Church will host our new guys. And I spoke before that there's a parking issue now. Our west side parking lot is not in use because of our building campaign that you'll learn more about at our presentation on April 15th. And the Christian school that's behind our church, they are using our east parking lot by Farmer Road. Now there's probably a dozen parking spots, maybe empty, and there's marked handicap spots. But the other, if you can't, you might